as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to underscoring, Chuck. Because we've done a little bit of this. We experienced it in previous sessions. But let's talk about this. Jim Ellis is someone that I quoted in Think Like a Filmmaker, and he said, when underscoring dialogue, you can't use melody, maybe a little, but not recognizable, and certainly not in rhythm. And he said, economy of composing, using a little to go a long way, or in other words, going nowhere in a hurry. Chuck, you have described it in, these are some quotes from you, actually, that I've put up here. So tell us a little bit about things that you think about when underscoring, especially, why don't we want to use melody? You talk about not being in the same vocal range. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, let's do the why we don't use melody. Let's do that first, okay? I'm going to switch back to a camera so we can see ourselves doing this. So I just want you to, just start speaking about anything.
Okay, I'm speaking about anything here, and this is where I'm speaking, and this is what I'm speaking, and I'm speaking right here. And I just keep speaking in this, and you're playing on top of me. And I can't think of what to say anymore, because all I hear is Amazing Grace.
There it is. Because I've hijacked what you did.
Right.
I played a melody on top of that. Now, I used a very familiar melody with that, but really any song that you use that has a melody that is familiar to your congregation.
People's brains are going to go right to that and not to
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, that is a very familiar hymn, and the majority of people in churches will know that one, but even hymns that are in our hymnal that you might think that you don't use in your own church, there is somebody in your congregation that probably will recognize the melody, and for that moment, you have hijacked that prayer in that moment for them.
So if you're not going to use the melody, but Amazing Grace is the song that we're using to weave, what are some of the things you would do instead of the melody?
Well, if you were a reader, maybe I would just suggest in the hymnal, just take out the top note, which is usually the note that you're playing for the melody. So just remove that completely. And if I did that, let me switch back to my piano hands. I'm not reading the hymnal right now, so I'm just I'll try to remove it as much as I can. So I'm going to put it back in, we'll keep it in the key of G. So maybe I just end up playing the chords.
And that gives me space on top of it to be talking and not competing. We're not competing with that.
Right, and I've taken it out of rhythm. Now the difficult part about that when I do play block chords like that is it's still predictable. It still feels like it's major, and let's say the prayer that you want to do is more of a petition that is asking maybe in something that is not necessarily a joyful moment. And if I've already established that I want to do major, I'm hijacking it again in a sense. So what I would do instead is I would play open chords. So if I was looking again at the hymnal and I was playing Amazing Grace, I might remove some of the notes that are creating those chords. Definition from major and minor. So what it would look like instead, if I was doing Amazing Grace, instead of playing the original, and instead of doing this, I'm going to do a couple of techniques with this. First, I'm going to remove what's defined as major or minor, and I'm going to extend the chord. I'm going to open it up a little bit. Ooh, so already it sounds a little different, right?
Right, and as a verbal artist, my prayer can go anywhere then.
Yes.
I can say, Holy living God, comforter of our souls, we bring before you those things that are heavy on our hearts today.
Yep.
Or I can go, Holy living God, God of possibilities, God of joy, God of thanks, we offer you our heartfelt thanks for all you have given us, for this day of sunshine. Yeah.
And so on. So those open chords, even if I was just using the chords that were part of Amazing Grace, I can do that. Now the other thing that we can do, and I'm jumping ahead on the screen up there, is I did talk about a second ago about underscoring and moving the left hand down, and that was what we just did to create that, and we're going somewhere. I did that with moving down from one. The next one says we must tune into each other
to be a duet.
Yes. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
There have been times early on and still in our exploring of this underscoring that I have treated the underscoring more like a solo artist instead of a duet. And what happens is
And I say, Chuck, it's a little busy.
Yeah.
It feels busy.
Or there's times where you've asked me to underscore and you're not giving me any space to do stuff. And
exactly.
And so we have to learn how to be in a balance with this and understanding that if you are asking me to underscore something, that it's very important that we understand what underscoring means, that it is a duet.
It's a duet.
That I'm not going to be able to enhance what you're saying unless you give me space. And you're not going to be able to speak in that rhythm unless I give you space.
Right. Yeah, and it's, yesterday I talked a little bit about how I used to be afraid of pauses, right? But when you're in a duet, you have to, you find those pauses with each other. Right. Now, we're going to try an example of this, but I want you to make that third point first before we do that so people can notice this.
All right.
And that is that you usually tell me that I speak in D flat.
So this is one of the main reasons that people complain about underscoring is that it says that we have to that it's too muddy because we all speak in a specific pitch. And let me show you how you can find this. Just by speaking, I'm able to find a specific common note just by speaking, and now I've found where I am speaking from. I'm on a D. So if I know that that's where I am speaking wise, and I try to underscore, I am now playing in the same register of where I speak. And because I'm continuing to hit that same note over and over and over again as an underscoring, it's muddy. It's muddy. Now I'm playing a little bit louder, but you get the idea that it does muddy it up. So
but it's not just key, it's also, when you say register, you mean like octave.
Yeah, because I can't ask you, Marcia, can you speak in a different pitch? because I can only play in the key of D. If I ask you to do that, I only speak in the key of D, and I say, Chuck, can you change your pitch? I have to speak way up here, that just doesn't sound natural. Oh boy! You can't do it. It doesn't sound natural. So as a piano player, as a keyboard player, I can take the piano up. And guitar players, you can do the same thing. You can change your voicing on the guitar. Organ players, you can do the same because it's keyboard based. All we're doing now is we're moving something up. So even if I know that I speak in the key of D, if I move it up here, I'm in a completely different register from where I was when I was speaking.
And we're not competing then.
And we are not competing.
Because you're in literally, like our ears are listening to different frequencies. Yeah.
So this is a great example. This even goes beyond underscoring. That when you have a band that has multiple instruments inside of it, and everybody's playing at the same time. The acoustic guitar player is playing, and the piano player is chunking chords, and the bass player is chunking. What you're doing is you're all playing the same frequency, and that's the reason it gets muddy. So a lot of this understanding of underscoring can really be applied to a lot of other things that have to do with multiple instruments or multiple layers. That we always have to be thinking, am I playing in the same, am I stepping on somebody? Am I completely muddying up what they're saying because I'm playing in the same audible frequency range?
Well, and that also makes me think that you want to ask the question, are we doing the same thing, or are we complementing because we're doing different things? So in other words, if I do a rhythm and I say something like, I go to the highest heights, and you go, dee-da-da, and I go to the depths, right? It becomes a little bit comical because we're doing the same thing instead of just complementing each other and adding to, we're kind of mimicking each other. And we don't want to mimic.
That goes to the two solo acts. We're two solo artists trying to compete.
To say the same thing.
Trying to compete. Whose voice can be louder?
Right.
Or whose voice can make the point stronger? And there's a lot of times as musicians, it's our job to support that spoken word, which means that we do have to take the back seat. We always have to think, am I too busy? And sometimes that means that if you start a phrase or if you start a scripture reading or a prayer and I do this, and I realize that really your prayer is so strong that it doesn't need underscoring, I have to be comfortable enough to say, I don't need anything else here. But I can tell even in some moments when you do a prayer or you do a scripture reading, you have hand signals that you can
I
use
do.
sometimes.
I do.
But now we've done this long enough
Right.
that I know just from your breath
Yeah.
whether you want me to underscore you or not.
Right, yeah. And so what he's talking about is sometimes we will not have said I will not have said I would like some musical support under this, but I'll feel it in the moment. And so what I do is I turn to him and I go like this,
Yes.
and he knows immediately that's what. And oftentimes that will happen when I'm about to do a bunch of instructions that, I need to give instructions about where we're going to head for communion or whatever. And it just feels like it's about to get instruction-y. And I'll do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever we're going to, and that will give me, I invite you, friends, to 3 stations. The middle one having gluten-free, the outer 2 have gluten. Come by the aisles and return, whatever, I'm making this up right now. But, it keeps us in the story, like we've been talking about, right? Rather than, okay, I start with my flight attendant, announcements, and it just totally loses the moment, this great moment that we set up with the communion prayer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's do Isaiah, this reading from Isaiah that's actually in week 1 of Calm and Bright. And what we have going on in Calm and Bright is that we have scriptures starting to be read, and there's no underscoring during the first part of it. And then at a certain point, I have indicated that music, which is the introduction to the anthem that's going to follow the scripture every time, begins to play underneath the second half of the scripture. This is part of what I've decided is a thread throughout this series. So this is "We Need a Silent Night" as our anthem. So that's what the basis of what he's going to use for the underscoring. But of course, he's going to do all these things that we just talked about.
Right, so let me play with the original. I'm just looking at the first 4 bars of that. And I've gone back to the piano so they can see what I'm doing with my hands. The piano introduction, if I'm reading straight from the sheet, goes like this. It's a 4-bar intro. So what I'm going to do as she reads through this, because I know that I have to extend it, I'm going to take stuff up the octave. I might take out the melody, but I'm just going to use stuff that's in those first 4 bars for underscoring.
And not necessarily the rhythm.
Not necessarily the rhythm, but all the information that I need for that underscoring, starting with the second part of your stuff,
is right there in those 4
is going to be
bars.
right there. Now, you don't want me to underscore the first part.
I don't want you to. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but okay. So, a reading from Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. The word that Isaiah saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us, and authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Parent, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness. From this time onward and forevermore, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. So
I went to the intro intro of that because I could feel you moving into that, which
Right.
gave me permission then to do something that was a little bit more elaborate.
Right.
And realizing that we wanted to go from this directly into We Need a Silent Night here, I went on and did the intro. So it's not like that lengthy wait that you read the scripture and then...
And now we're going to get,
and
now we have the intro.
And the choir gets stood up and you walk over to, and
Right.
everybody waits for everything to happen and
Yes,
everybody's
we're like,
looking.
Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and if we practice this, which we would,
Yeah.
we would discover this, and then if we're doing this in the Q to Q before choir practice, then we would say, okay, so when we get to his authority shall grow continually and there will be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom, that would be the time to raise the
Yes.
choir. So choir director
Yes.
raises the choir. And then the music is, and the reader would need to know that they're going to crescendo in
Yeah.
there so that we finish. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this.
It's the season of the year.
We
Yes.
come to celebrate. Yeah! And that's what we do in rehearsal. In our Q to Q rehearsal, we figure something out like that and we go, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
High five,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Because in that moment, what that does is that we hear the scripture and the message of the scripture in a deeper way because we're dramatizing it, right? We are adding to the meaning through the medium.
And it also captures the attention span that's sometimes very short
Right.
from your congregation for
Right.
anybody. We live
Yeah.
in a world that has screens everywhere, and if we give 3 seconds for people not to stay in the moment, they're thinking about can't believe that Downton Abbey ended, and what am I going to have to eat for later for breakfast or whatever. It's easy for us to do that, and this connects the scripture with the anthem, which connects everything else. It's
Yeah.
just it's powerful.
Yeah. So